What is it that makes a good empire? Its cultural history, military might, perhaps its geographical location. Though all of these are acceptable answers, all when by comparison to that which is ultimately absolute. Soul, the will, the spirit to thrive and achieve more despite insurmountable odds or clear answers. Gold and power are all useless in the hands of an incompetent leader. The founders of the Western Lakes, the leaders who united Pazar knew these very lessons, though it would take tears, blood, and great personal sacrifice to learn them. Let us now rekindle the tale of the men who formed the Western Lakes and sought out the reality of their enemies with the weapon known only as will. Welcome to our telling of a new story of history, known only as Istorina. We start our story where all good stories of this era begin. The fall of the mightiest realm that had ever existed, the Kingdom of Orun. An event so catastrophic it began the new calendar system and the use of the acronym NC among historians. During the post-credit years of Orun's collapse, the city-states of Pazar were still recovering from their destructive wars several years prior. Up until the year 3 OC, the region had stood together in a loose defense pact called the Alliance of Seven. It encompassed the 7 great families of the time: the Puktas, the Deniks, the Lagays, the Bagaz, the Dusas, the Appas, and the Bavols. This alliance had ensured peace in the land for the last 42 years. That is, until the political marriage between the Lagays and the Bagaz ended in bloodshed and humiliation. This was an insult too grave for the Bagaz to ignore. Together with their allies, they crushed the Lagay army, wiped out their family line, and completely destroyed their capital city of Gazin. This sent shockwaves around the region. What was the point of a defense alliance if such barbarity was still allowed? The Bagays did not intend for this outcome, but among the leaders of Pazar the Alliance of Seven was all but dead but in name. That name, leaving just enough tension for a time of peace. That takes us back to the start of our story, the collapse of Orun. Orun's presence was seen as a calming factor within the southern regions. Though waning in the later half of the 1st century OC, Orun would happily humble any ambitious leader whose mind had outgrown his sword. With its fall, the region was near instantaneously engulfed by war. Pazar this time was not spared. In 4 NC, Zinzi marauders fleeing their home came across the major city-state of Zavin, controlled by the Pukta family. They were woefully unprepared. The Puktas were almost entirely massacred during the pillage, Modayun Pukta and his 2 brothers being some of the few important survivors. Modayun was known for his smug demeanor and adventurous spirit. With his father now dead, he was now acting head of his family name, what little remained. Modayun and his family was shocked by the brutality and efficiency of the attacks. The local Mushpa tribes had betrayed them and joined in on the pillage, killing many of their allies in the process. The Puktas left with few alternatives, headed north, to appeal the Appas for aid. Modayun wanted to invoke the Alliance of Seven defense agreement, like the old times, but Vakurin, acting head of the Appa family, seemed uninterested in helping them in their fight. Modayun and his family pleaded, offering anything they could think of: people, resources, land. Vakurin would accept all of it, but still asked for one thing: Modayun's wife. In the past, he had long sought after her, even after her marriage to Modayun. It was only due to Modayun's father that he had backed off. Now that the head of the family was Modayun, Vakurin's lust was on full display. For Modayun and his family, this was too much, too blatant. If agreed, the Pukta name would never command respect again. Modayun, in his wife's honor, hurled every obscenity he could think of at Vakurin. Before Vakurin even had time to process this transgression, The Puktas had already fled the city, this time inbound west towards Denielhcomposer territory. Modayun would offer the same thing to the Denielhcomposers, this time being received much better. But their leader, Denielhcomposer, was a ruthless man. He asked for nearly 30% of towns under their control, and in return, he would help them. By the time Modayun reluctantly agreed, it had already been 14 days since the massacre of Zurvan, so together with they marched out with 1,000 strong immediately. Along the road to Zurvan, they received a message. Vukurin had felt slighted, betrayed by his close allies. Because of this, he was reconsidering their friendship, unless Modayun's wife became his concubine at once. Annoyed by this letter, apprehended the Puktas and demanded retributions for this lack of transparency. Though Vukurin was described on many occasions as the most important crybaby in the world, and Vukurin were considered close allies. Vukurin's family, the Appas, controlled the largest population and army in the region. Despite his tantrums, needed him. But needing does not mean bowing. He would not be handing over Modayun's wife. Instead, he did something more horrific. His guards proceeded to debeautify her, leaving her horribly scarred and partially blind, all while the Puktas watched. She was an extremely beautiful and sought-after woman during her youth, and also was Modayun's childhood sweetheart. He would proclaim endlessly how beautiful and loving his wife was. After this, he was left speechless, while his brothers were filled with rage. After that day, Modayun's wife would never appear in public again. Told Vukurin's messengers the matter was settled and sent them back. He released the Puktas thereafter, and, surprisingly, they continued their march down south. The three Pukta brothers, Modayun, Rapairon, and the Euron, swore that day in secret that together they will kill and Vukurin, get their revenge for Modayun, and unite the 6 villages under the Pukta name. But first, they had to retake Zurvan. By the time they were approaching Zurvan, the brothers' uncle, Glavka Pukta, had joined the march south with 300 men. Together with their army numbered around 1,300 strong. Soon after, received word that Vukurin did not receive the news with grace. He went and threw a proper fit. In response, Vukurin assembled 3 armies of 1,000 men each and begun marching south towards Zurvan. Angered by this stupidity, double-timed it. When the Puktas arrived first, and immediately put Zurvan under siege. Once Vukurin heard they had arrived, he turned his army around and headed back home. But not before doing some raids on Pukta towns and permanently leaving garrisons in the area, sending a clear message: these are now mine. A problem for another day perhaps. But for now, Vukurin was no longer an issue. The bandits and worshippers had entrenched themselves using the houses and walls of the city, destroying the city to defend it. The fighting lasted several days until a brawl inside the city between the bandits and worshippers broke out over wine. The bandits were slaughtered and the writing was on the wall for the defenders. The following day, the attack was assaulted, and by day's end, 6-11-4, Zurvan was firmly under Pukta control. During the fighting, the Euron was killed, greatly affecting the 2 brothers and leaving them grief-stricken. If that wasn't bad enough, Modayun's wife could no longer bear her new existence and drowned herself in the local river 5 days later. This was too much for Modayun. Within little under a decade, he would lose both his parents, his beloved brother and wife, and most of his friends and family. Modayun, after hearing the news, would become bedridden and hopelessly depressed, leaving all responsibilities of the family and kingdom to Rapairon, the second oldest. While the Pukta family picked themselves back up, the rest of the kingdoms knew things were changing. The promises Modayun made to would not be forgotten, despite his depression. Forced large land concessions onto the Puktas, on top of what Vukurin had already stolen. Ordered a raid on the royal throne room and took any sculptures and paintings the bandits didn't already burn or desecrate. Rapairon was all but helpless to stop his family's treasures from being plundered. these extremely disrespectful acts were not done recklessly. So wanted the Puktas and everyone else to know, the Puktas were now his lapdog. If he said jump, they better ask how high and when. Jatelmon Bevo, head of the Bevo family, knew if something wasn't done, the entire region could fall under Denielhcomposer rule within 10 years. Soon, he began talking with the other families, Kagero Paga of the Paga family, and Gayuno Dusa of the Dusa family. He sought to form an agreement to counter the CNC alliance, the Denielhcomposer and Appa kingdoms. The Pagas were all for it, but Gayuno refused. His family line was always difficult to deal with. They came from noble birth within the core lands. From their perspective, this entire region belonged to them. They controlled the mass majority of Mushpa tribes and felt quite confidently in their position. The Dusas walked out of the meeting. Jatelmon was quoted saying, "The only thing more annoying than Dusa arrogance is Dusa stupidity byset arrogance." But for now, the newly formed C and G alliance would comprise of Jatelmon and Kagero. By next year, tension between the two alliances was steadily increasing. Border disputes between the farmers and local lords was not helping. So Jatelmon, looking for more help, traveled to Zavin to see Modayun. He was still deep in his depression and unwilling to speak to the foreign leader. He hadn't bathed in several months and his eyes showed no passion for life. Jatelmon was quoted saying to Rapairon, "That man, your brother, is a lost cause. Do yourself and your family some respect and start stepping up. They're gonna need a leader here soon. Modayun just isn't cut out for it. Not anymore." Rapairon by this time had bigger problems than that. Glaka Pukta, Modayun and Rapairon's uncle, was getting fed up with Modayun's slothfulness. Glaka on many occasions would try to assert his dominance within the family, and each and every time Rapairon would put him down, the last time being quite embarrassing for him. So he fled the city towards Dusa territory, trying to convince Gayuno to overthrow the brothers and put him in charge. Seeing how the Puktas were currently under Denielhcomposer protection, that would be quite troublesome for the Dusas. So Gayuno responded with a polite foe, "We will help when the time is right. Until then, you may stay here." A nothing answer, but something for Glaka to latch onto and work towards. His son, Sinja, however, was not okay with this agreement. He was disgusted by his father's actions and betrayal of their family. He tried to stay by his cousin's side and help them in the upcoming wars. Though Rapairon's Glaka problem was no longer an immediate issue, he still had many problems to resolve. The ever-increasing debt trap of Seoul, the possibility of Gayuno taking Glaka's offer, and the overall further decline of their family name. They needed Modayun. By 6 NC, Rapairon had had enough. He stormed into Modayun's room and punched him dead center in his face. He reminded him of the promise they made so long ago with their late brother. Till now, Rapairon had never talked this bluntly with him. He gave these words of wisdom to his brother. "Modayun, it's time. I've been more than accommodating of you, but this family needs you to become the leader our father raised. It's time for you to get up. You think you're the only one hurting, the only one who mourns mother and father? Almost everyone I know is gone. I cry for them the same as you. The only difference is, it doesn't stop me from protecting the ones that are still left, that are here. There's still things to fight for, Modayun. This family needs you. I need you. I want my brother back. Up until now, I've defended you against them all. The Bavos, Glaka, all servants, the damn people. They all lost hope in you. But I never did. Not for a damn second. Now is the time. Every year, Seoul comes closer to erasing our name, our father's name. Vakurin constantly humiliates us. Glaka joins the damn pompous fucks. We made a promise with the Euron, our brother. How about you start honoring your half of that promise? Cause I'm done trying. if you're not even gonna bother. It seemed this speech left an impact on Modayun, as not even a week later, he was seen coming out of his room, well dressed and wandering the halls, slowly taking over his responsibilities as leader. While Modayun was slowly coming out of his depression, things were not well elsewhere. The hot topic of the geopolitics of the time was influence on the northern Mobilize tribes. Clashes between the CNC and C&G alliance began intensifying in earnest. At the Battle of Secured Hill, Tyrrenum and his allies were suddenly defeated by Sol and Valkyrin. They were pushed all the way back to Glaviken, Tyrrenum's capital city. After a 2-week-long siege, Tyrrenum successfully defended the city and forced CNC to withdraw from his lands. Tyrrenum and his allies would lose control over the central tribes and firmly solidify Valkyrin's position as the strongest kingdom in the region. Even though Valkyrin had won control over the central Mobilize tribes, over 60% of them in Pajapaveki and the surrounding regions fell under the Dusa kingdom. Gayun of Dusa was without a doubt one of the most hated lords within the region, but by far the most beloved kingdom by the Super tribes. Super, short for Mobilize. With this changing geopolitical situation, Tyrrenum and Kagero needed allies and quickly. Luckily, people were already talking about the new Pukta leader coming out of his depression and uniting the Puktas once again. Tyrrenum knew this was an excellent opportunity to undermine Sol's Gator-like grip over the Puktas. So by next year, they sent messengers in secret hoping the brothers would join them. Modayun, still getting on his feet, gladly accepted. But Modayun didn't want to sign on as a junior partner. He wanted equal footing within the alliance. So Modayun and Rapyron conceived of a plan to raise their status. Modayun would go to Glaviken in secret to properly greet them and accept their offer, while Rapyron and a small group of men would head to formerly held Pukta land. There, he was supposed to build a fort and formally declare the surrounding lands theirs, hopefully weakening Valkyrin's perceived power among the smaller towns and tribes. But by the time Modayun had reached Glaviken, the plan had already failed, and Rapyron and his men were captured. Valkyrin, underestimating Pukta independence, saw this only as an aggressive move by Sol. So to spite him, Valkyrin had Rapyron executed and his head delivered to Sol's doorstep. He then mobilized his army and began marching west. Sol, unaware of these events, was blindsided by this sudden change in behavior. In retaliation, Sol gathered his army and marched east looking for answers. While the two bigwigs of the Central Plains was having a pissing contest, Modayun, due to his brother's likely death, had hardened his resolve to fulfill his promise to Deuron and now Rapyron. He ordered Sinja to gather their army and march north to meet him. The tribes that killed Rapyron would know retribution. In Deca 3-7 NC, Modayun marched into Super territory. Here, he would make his stance known well. You do not mess with the Puktas any longer. In a surprising turn of events, despite being outnumbered 2-1, the tribe was completely annihilated, and their wealth now in the hands of Modayun. Valkyrin had brushed off the Puktas as no more than a subservient family to the Denielhcomposer, but that status was now being questioned. Sol knew this, and so did Tyrrenum. Modayun continued building the fort and proclaiming the surrounding land his. This raised serious problems for Valkyrin. They were the second largest Mobilize tribe in Pajapaveki. Now all that land and resources would go to, he assumed, Sol. He, of course, was wrong. After having a close encounter and talking it out, Valkyrin and Sol rebuilt their friendship and alliance. Valkyrin knew at this moment Modayun and the Puktas had to die by his hand. So both armies, separately, began racing towards the Pukta's central city of Zavin. But Modayun had different plans. All the wealth he had collected from the Supers was delivered to Sol directly with a message stating, "The last of what we owe you. We are now free." You have to remember that Modayun promised land and resources to the Denielhcomposer if they agreed to help with their bandit problem all those years ago. This was the remainder of that debt. So, honor-bound, took the gold begrudgingly and turned around. Vakurin would face Modayun alone. The upper forces led by Vakurin began their march south. With an army of 2,800 strong, the Pukta army led by Modayun was outnumbered 5-2, and his forces were still quite battered from their clash with the Sippers earlier that week. Modayun had already handled the sole threat. His only issue now was Vakurin. A direct battle with Vakurin would be quite hard for anyone to find a victory in such circumstances. Modayun did have one advantage. He knew these areas like the back of his hand. So he decided to make his stand at a nearby gorge with an opening. Modayun roughly had around 1,100 troops, and only 600 of them battle ready. With such odds, Vakurin was expecting an easy victory. Once the Pukta army was in sight, he ordered his men into battle formation, and at the sound of the horn, they advanced. His men began slowly crossing the river, but due to Vakurin's unfamiliarity with the area, the current was much stronger upstream than he had originally assumed. Men began getting swept away, breaking formation. So, quite ingeniously, Vakurin ordered his troops to lock arms, so if one man fell, his fellow brothers could pick them up. It worked surprisingly well, and in due time, half of Vakurin's army was well across the river. Here though, Modayun put his plan into action. He ordered his men to roll down tree trunks they had cut down earlier in the day, yelling, "Now, let them see what happens when you enter Pukta land." The tree trunks began steaming downhill, tearing through Vakurin's tightly packed army. During the confusion, Modayun charged his men downhill and engaged the bewildered Appa forces. The Appas put up a meager defense, but by battle's end, over half of Vakurin's army had drowned, and several hundred more cut down by the sword. It was a humiliating loss. Vakurin was forced to flee with a measly 700 men out of the 2,800 he had come here with. Humiliation for Vakurin and the Appa family as a whole. Soon after the battle, news started spreading about Vakurin's devastating defeat at the hands of a family many assumed to be subjugated. Within a single decade, the Puktas had defeated the second largest Maruspa tribe, secured their freedom from the Deniks, and completely destroyed the most powerful army in Pajab Veki. To onlookers, this was nothing short from an act of the stars, proving to everyone that the Puktas were here to stay, and they were a force to be reckoned with. Vakurin began telling people Modayun had tricked the stars into thinking he was vile, like how Riv tricked Yahero. But to ordinary people, this only propelled Modayun's local fame into celebrity stardom. The story going, Modayun had slept with the deity of wrath and used her love for him to destroy Vakurin's army. Vakurin, needing to restore his family name, tried forcing So into marching south with him, but he refused. He knew Vakurin's army was the backbone of their alliance. If they had suffered a second defeat due to Modayun's stardom and lack of morale, it would be a catastrophe. So for now, the victory went to the Puktas. They have restored their name, half of their land, and military might. Tyrrenum, hearing all of this, was quite impressed. Modayun was officially brought into the alliance of C and G, making it now the CGJ alliance. Later that year, Modayun remarried, and the Pukta family officially disowned Glaka after a failed assassination attempt on Modayun's life. The region was firmly divided into two major coalitions, C and C, led by So and Vakurin, and the CGJ, led by Tyrrenum, Kagero, and Modayun, with the Dusas being the remainder sole kingdom. Before they could focus on C and C though, they needed to take down the Dusas. By early next year, things were already moving. Tyrrenum had devised a plan to take the Dusas out. The neutrality and past history of switching sides mid-war made them an unpredictable force. Now that the Puktas were with him though, he had much better strategic positioning. In the early decades of spring, Modayun, with an army 800 strong, began raiding Muspa villages under Dusa protection. Due to Modayun's past history with the Muspa tribes, these raids indiscriminately slaughtered any civilian that crossed their path. Iyuno didn't take kindly to this. Together with Glaka and the other Muspa tribes, they marched on Modayun to put him down. The problem being, that made their army quite large and encompassing. while the Puktas were small and nimble, allowing them to keep slipping away. They repeated this pattern of cat and mouse for an entire week until Jotelmon finally arrived. The Dusas were surrounded. During the preceding battle, they were nearly wiped to the man. Iuno was killed in battle, and the remainder of the army fled back to Boamps, the Dusas' capital city. So and Vakurin wanted to intervene, but Kagor's army was positioned in a way that, if they did, that would leave their lands vulnerable from northern attack. So they decided to watch and wait. Once Jotelmon and Modayun reached Boamps, they laid the city under siege. The Dusas and Glaka held out for nearly a week and a half until the walls were eventually breached and the city pillaged. Glaka went out fighting for a kingdom that never really respected him to begin with. His son Sinja was heartbroken that, even in the end, his father never atoned for his betrayal. With this new political situation, Sol was starting to wonder if the imbalance was becoming too great. And by imbalance, meaning he wasn't on top. He knew something needed to be done. The CGJ alliance now outnumbered them in land and manpower. With the kingdom of Dusa being captured and all of their family being executed, the odds greatly started to favor their opponents. While Sol made plans to counter his worries and keep Vakurin in check, Jotelmon, Modayun, and Kagro could now finally focus their efforts west. In the year 8 NC, many could already see the grand confrontation that was building. That conflict finally being told in part 2 of this series. See you in the next part, where we conclude the epic tale of the formation of the Western Lakes, the greatest independent kingdom Western Moti had ever seen.
日暮的村前，确认。